Welcome to Sisters in Arms. I'm Carrie Ann Auclair.
And I'm Renee Gagne. Together we serve as a Second Amendment resource for our communities.
And today we have another special guest, which is the same special guest that we had in another episode. Mike Harris from GOAL, Gun Owners Action League, the Director of Public Policy. So thank you again.
Of course.
We always have a lot to talk about, so let's dive into it.
In a very condensed time.
Yeah, I know. It's awful. So I know
I'm not good at that.
we wanted to talk about what was going on in the committee.
In the state legislature?
Yes.
Massachusetts.
Because we have two bills, one that passed through the House, one that passed through the Senate.
Yes.
And now they're in conference committee talking about both bills and potentially could combine them. And it's,
So technically it's one bill.
yeah, now it
Really want
is,
to vote on
right.
that.
Yeah.
Well, no, it always was. 'Cause
Yep.
The Senate filed theirs as an amendment to the
Yeah.
House version,
Yep.
which was an initial concession I didn't like, because it was like, oh yeah, we'll just, instead of making a problem for you, we'll just make it an amendment and we'll just conference the language. I was like,
And what's so interesting is the conference committee, it's private. We
Yeah, I mean,
don't
that's-
have, we have no idea what's going on.
So ostensibly, the public part of the process has already taken place. That's the rationale behind making conference committees executive sessions, where they can hash out details and make and negotiate in private as they. Well, that's how
I
it
know.
works. I mean, because the bill has, like I said, ostensibly gotten its public hearings and was heard publicly on the floor and got 2 different votes by
Right.
both chambers. So,
So how many people are on the conference committee right
6.
now, and who is it, and how does it structure?
So the way that they're usually structured is there's 2 members of the majority party from each chamber, and there's 1 member of the minority party from each chamber, and they'll negotiate out the differences in the bill.
Yep,
That's the
so
way it always
how,
works.
break it down, how many Republicans and how many Democrats?
4 Democrats, 2 Republicans.
Okay.
That's the way the legislature
Yep,
breaks down
for
right now.
People don't
Sure.
understand. So where is it right now?
In conference committee.
And have you heard anything? Because we've heard some things that it's
Yeah, I mean,
moving.
I can't go into a ton of detail because they're
Yeah.
supposed to be private negotiations, but we have people in the committee that we still talk to, and some staff and things that kind of feed us little dribs and drabs of information that are coming out. Nothing huge, but they're still negotiating large portions of the bill.
So
I
this
think
is the same bill that when we did the listening tour,
Yep.
that like 5 hot seconds after the tour happened,
HDD.
this big massive bill
Yes.
came out.
on what was it? Was it Columbus Day weekend? I think right before Columbus
Yeah,
It
Day.
was
was
definitely a
June
holiday.
25th,
Yeah.
2024.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, that was the
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah.
June
The
25th.
second version came out in October. That's right.
Yeah, so it's been a year. So what we're talking about now is an extent.
Well, this is the end result of all of that, discussion and work.
Right.
Use the term discussion loosely.
So the bill has changed. The numbers have changed.
Right.
A few times, yeah.
Just to keep because we're
Yep.
still seeing 4420 on people's lawns, and we're like, it's not.
Well,
it just
it's
kind of
the premise
became
of it.
the rallying cry, I guess. That
Yeah.
was the number that everybody knew it by at the beginning.
Yeah.
The fact that it stayed a House docket number for so long before they had to pull their weird little legislative maneuvers is kind of funny to me still, because it didn't get an actual bill number until it was, stuck into a pre-existing.
So now the new signs, you see some of the new signs out that says
HD
process matters.
4139. Yep.
Yep.
Process matters. Yes, that is a kind of I don't know, what would you call it, like a campaign.
It's a
from GOAL,
campaign, but
Yeah.
yep.
where we on our website we outline the entire timeline of the bill from start to finish.
On
kind
the
of
GOAL
where-
website.
Yep, on the GOAL website. Sorry, goal.org. Thank you for reminding
I
me to
got
get the
you,
plugs
I
in. I
got you.
appreciate it. But yeah, on the GOAL website, goal.org, it's or you can just go to processmatters.org.
Yep.
And it just outlines the process from beginning to end of where this bill came from, the impetus behind it, kind of the process that led us to where we are now. And it's been very unusual. Rather than come out with language that was put out to the public initially, they went on a listening tour where they stopped at, I don't know, what was it, 12 were there 12
It
different
was,
stops?
so 9 out of 12 is
Yeah.
what I went to.
Yeah,
9
so
out
there
of
were
12.
so there were 12 different stops
Or
all
11.
around the Commonwealth where they discussed different topics. They had panelists.
First one was mental health and
Yeah.
firearms.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then impacted communities, things
Yep.
like that. And we-
Hunting, there was one on
Yep.
hunting.
And initially, we had a good working relationship with Representative Day, who was assigned to work on the bill from the Speaker of the House. Initially we had a good relationship. We worked on it
So
with him.
what we thought was we were coming to really give him our input.
Yeah, I
right?
mean, we're the experts on this
I mean,
stuff.
we drove around everywhere. We drove to places we never
drove
heard of.
6 hours one
Yeah,
night.
to get to
Yeah.
one listening
Yeah.
tour that lasted less than 2 hours, we drove 6 hours.
I
But
was
we
with you for
had
most
to
of
make
them, yeah.
our faces seen
Of
and
course.
heard, and it was so important. So if anybody doesn't know, like about a year before HD 4420 dropped, which I had the date wrong, it was actually the 26th of June.
So a
The
year
year
ago.
before that,
Mm-hmm.
Representative Michael Day did something called the listening tour.
Yeah.
And it was basically talking about different topics that he was trying to make safer communities with. And it was a lot to do with mental health and guns.
It was all
And
kinds of stuff.
It was all sorts of different
It
things.
lasted like about 6 months.
Yeah.
Started in January. And went
And it
on
was odd because it just he every single one of them was he had to draw like some kind of a nexus between what the topic was and firearms. It was
Yep.
what blah 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 and guns blah blah blah. It was a little frustrating. We kind of we knew that it wasn't going to be
It wasn't going to
easy
end
from
up
the
good
beginning.
for
Well, the
us.
problem was the panel didn't, the beginning panels
Mm-hmm.
at the first, I remember the first one, it was no two-way
Right.
pro people. It was all people that were against guns. And we're like,
And-
well, where are the experts?
And to Rep. Day's credit, we actually asked them about that, and they said, well, what are your recommendations? And we sent them a bunch of names, and they took them. And we ended up getting a few people on a few different
Yeah, that's
panels.
good.
So, to their credit, at the beginning, it did seem to be a pretty good working relationship. We knew we weren't going to get everything we wanted, but we
Right.
didn't think it was going to end up with,
Well, I think it
this
was
atom bomb
unfortunate
we
because
ended
it
up
wasn't
with.
advertised very well. So a lot of the
Yeah, I
people
mean-
that were finding out about it after were like, well, what the heck? I
Yeah.
would have gone. I would have
The
gone. I
first
would've
one
gone."
took place at a college,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the girls went and she said, I go to this college, and I didn't even know this was here until like yesterday.
And it was
someone
on
told me."
suicide.
Yeah.
And her,
And her
yeah,
sister
his
had,
sister.
yeah,
And, I'm
it's
not.
crazy.
So that's where so this,
Yeah.
going forward, now we're here in conference committee.
Yeah, and in conference committee, I mean, like I said, it's in conference committee. That's kind of where it is right now.
Right.
There isn't a ton to talk about,
Right.
as far as substantive discussion that's happening in the room, because none of us are in the room. And, exactly. And,
Yeah.
and the members of the legislature betraying what happens in the conference committee it's going to make it so that they can't be on ones in the future. So, we're not going to get a ton of details of the conversation. All we know is that there was a little bit of, not reluctance, but there were, a little bit of a lack of urgency on behalf of some of the members of some of the Senate members of
Yep.
the committee, given that this wasn't really a big priority of the Senate and the Senate President heading into this legislative session.
And now it seems
And
like it's changed a bit.
Well, not really,
Yeah.
but it was a big priority for the Speaker of the House. This was
Okay.
one of his. This was one of his pet projects. This was one of his big pushes. We're not. I'm pretty sure he's not running again. I haven't checked.
Yeah, I
the,
feel like he's not either. But he
Yeah.
tasked Mike Day with this big, long thing.
But and this was one of his. He was
I'm
legacy
sure
shopping.
Mike Day didn't want
Yeah.
to do this. I'm sure he was
Well,
like, oh, God.
at this point.
yeah, who
Who
knows?
knows? But he's like the speaker was legacy shopping. This is one of the things he wanted to leave us with.
Yeah.
And every 10 years, it seems like one of these bills comes down. We had it in '94, we had it in '04, 14, and now
Yep.
24.
Yeah.
It keeps happening. So, it was
So what
it
do
was
what
just
do
about
we
a matter of
do
time.
at this point? I mean, I know what to do. You're here. You're the guest. You're the expert.
What do we do
What
with
do we
laymen?
do now?
What do we do for
right
the
now?
laymen that are watching?
Contact the members of the conference committee.
Yeah.
They're listed on our website, on Goal's
So
website,
goal.org.
goal.org. Yep. Especially if you're a constituent of theirs, It's important. You have a little bit more sway over them than
Right.
most people do because you can vote for them or not for them, and they need to convince you to vote for them next time. So, especially if you're a constituent, reach out to them, let them know how you feel.
And we got
Remains to be
talking
seen.
points on the website as well that will help you get through that. Be respectful, call them up. We don't want to scream and yell at them because it just only proves what they are trying to prove, which is wrong.
Yeah.
So gun owners are maniacs.
Yeah. So, email, phone calls. You can email, phone calls, letters.
Write a letter. Show
Yep.
up.
Show
Go
up.
to the
You know what I
building.
loved about the Goal website? You don't have to be a member to see this stuff on the
Right.
front page. And I didn't know who the members were on that committee, but Goal spells it out. And it even
Yeah.
gives you, it's like dummy proof. You just click on it and
Yeah.
it brings
Yeah.
you right to the email and then you just click,
Right.
click, click.
I know, it's
Yeah.
great.
Super easy.
And
I
usually
love
we're
that
not
website.
usually we're not big fans of putting out form emails because I spent 12 years in the building as a staffer, and when an issue like this comes up, especially something this big, and you're getting a ton of mail and emails and stuff on it, once you see something that looks like all the other ones that are coming in,
Trash
you just
can?
put them in. Well, not even a trash can. You just put them in a pile. You say, all right, these are the ones that are for it. These are the ones that are against it. A canned email gets a canned response.
Exactly.
So I don't even have to read this. I know what their opinion is.
Right.
Just put it to the side.
So-
But if you get something that's written by you that actually
Right.
has something to say.
So are the
little
staffers
bit
looking
more.
at it before the
Yeah, I mean,
legislator?
they don't have enough time to do all of that stuff. As a staffer and as a legislature, you have to be like an accidental expert on like 1,000 different things that are coming your way. And it depends on what happens during the legislative session, what
But
you
that's
become
good
an
to
expert
know
on.
because so
Yeah.
many people say, can you help me write a letter? And they want to just copy what you write. But like you said, that's a canned letter and
But
it's
you
going to get a
can
canned
take,
response.
you can take the email.
can take it and make it your own,
You can
yeah.
take it and make it your own,
Yeah.
just
That's what we always
going through the
recommend.
talking points and really feel what
Right.
hits you the most and
Yeah,
just-
that's what I was
talk
always
about
telling
it.
people at the beginning. I mean, now that we're coming up against it, there's a little more urgency. Do what you got to do. Get it in there. It's fine. But back when it first came out, I was always telling people like, hey, read our breakdown of the bill. It's up there. Pick out the things that offend your sensibilities the most,
Yeah.
and focus on those items
Right.
in your letter. But
and if you called once, call again. It
Yeah.
doesn't, just keep on calling,
Exactly.
keep on emailing, keep on mailing. You just got to keep on
Yep.
pushing because,
Yeah.
obviously, as our, seems like a slogan,
Right.
this fight's not over.
Yeah, and heading into after the next step, actually, after the conference committee and they release
Whatever.
ought to pass or ought not to pass report on it, which is what it's called. It's called a committee report. It's going to go to the vote. It's going to go to each of the chambers for a vote.
So a House and a
an
Senate
up or down
again.
vote. There's no
Yep.
more discussion. There's no amendments. There's no nothing. It's
And
an
you
up or down
can't,
vote.
we won't have any chance to go there and
Nope,
testify or
nothing.
anything like that.
No more public hearings. No more public.
That's over.
anything.
That ship sailed.
That stuff's over. So
That's the crazy part.
But at this point, once it's out of committee, it's still up to House and Senate leadership whether or not it makes it to the floor for a vote. So if we really wanted to push
That's when
President
we can push.
Spilka or Speaker Mariano to the extent that he's willing to listen to us, that's what you really want to do. You want to call the Senate President's office or the Speaker of the House's office and just say, hey, we're
And you don't
we're
have to
opposed
be a
this.
constituent
Yep.
for that.
You do not have to be a constituent.
Nope.
They are the Speaker of the House for everyone,
Yep.
and the Senate President
I
for
I
everyone.
contacted everybody, even if I
have
wasn't,
to.
you know.
It's important. So, but that's the next step. That's where it's going next, depending on when or if they release a report.
Yeah. And the session ends July 31st.
July 31st is the
And
last day of
hopefully
session.
we can,
Yep.
they you know.
That's the hope. I mean, there's some other issues that are coming up that are a lot more pressing.
Yes, so we have,
So-
let's talk about the.
Oh, those-
We
yeah,
have
so-
3 bills that just went to third reading.
Yeah. So we
Three?
had 3 bills. The first number is slipping me.
Yeah, I was trying to
apologize.
fied it earlier and
Yeah,
I couldn't find
but
it.
it's related to the other one. So it's 2359, and that bill. Both of them have to do with carrying in sensitive places.
Which means,
Polling places,
Yeah.
public buildings, public parks, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But
What do you mean public buildings?
like government buildings.
Oh,
Town
The
halls.
State House, town halls,
Yep,
stuff
that
like
kind of
that. But one of the more concerning parts of it is carrying during protests. So if you want to exercise your First Amendment, you have to give up
Your Second
exercising
Amendment.
your
Well,
Second
at what
Amendment
point do you call it a
simultaneously.
protest, or when you're just
Rallying?
rallying? When do, like who decides what protest?
Well, they're saying any public gathering, so I think they would both be included in the language that's
Any
being put
public
forth.
gathering?
Well, not
That's
any
like-
public gathering,
like-
but any politically motivated
Right.
public gathering where you're trying to get some kind of a message across. So if Goal had a rally, you wouldn't be able to carry. It's nonsense. So
Which we end up typically going to the State House, so we don't carry it.
Yeah, I know. Shh, don't tell anyone. But no, so like we say, if you want to exercise your First Amendment rights,
Yeah.
you have to give up your Second Amendment rights.
Yeah, that makes no sense.
Doesn't make sense. And then the other bill that just moved on the 20th, what was that, Friday or Thursday? Thursday, was a ban on semi-autos, which
Yeah, I
Raplinsky files
didn't know
every
that
year.
till just now.
Yeah,
Oh,
I saw it this
today.
morning. I saw it
Yeah.
this morning too.
So a
Yeah.
ban on semi-auto anything, long guns, pistols?
Yeah, that makes
everything,
sense.
everything.
Did you see the language? Was it like, are
Well,
you
it's the same.
kidding?
I've seen the language every year that it's been filed. Raplinsky files it perennially. Every single year he files the same.
Oh, so it's not
legislation.
new?
Not new at all in any definition of the
So
word.
that brings me to what just made me think of this. How old are these bills? Like
Oh,
how
some of
long have
them
they
are-
been rotating back and forth?
I'm not sure about the first two. I mean, I know there's been sensitive places concerns for a while. That's one of the buzzwords. Those two have been floating around for a couple of different sessions. But the semi-auto bans, I mean, that's an
And
annual
this is all
file.
Massachusetts?
Yep,
Right.
just
law.
Massachusetts. Yeah.
Just for
Yep.
anyone who's listening, this is
But-
Massachusetts.
And neither of them have
yeah.
none of them have passed. They're not law yet.
Oh,
They're
did I
just
say
bills.
law? I'm sorry,
No.
Massachusetts bills.
No,
But did I
just-
say law?
just
I
wanted
think I
to-
might have.
It's all good.
But it
Big
went
difference.
through the third reading, which is
No, so it's
some of the
been
process.
sent to the committee on third reading. So
Yep.
do you want me to walk through like
Yeah, real
quick
quick.
version of the
Yeah,
process?
so we can understand it. 'cause-
bill gets filed, it gets its first reading, and
Yep.
it gets assigned to a committee. If it's filed before the deadline, which is usually like the first or second week after they're in session, like
Oh, okay,
first, second
yeah.
week of February, something like that, it automatically gets assigned to committee and it's guaranteed a public hearing. If it's filed after that, it has to go to the Committee on Rules, where they will determine if it goes to a committee and which committee it is, and then that committee will determine whether or not it gets a hearing. But anyways, here nor there. It then goes to the committee that it's in. It gets a favorable and unfavorable report. It gets out to the floor, where it gets a second reading. And then after its second reading, it's assigned to the, after the report, it goes to the Committee on Rules, where then it will be put out to the floor, where it gets a second reading. If it gets a second reading, it's then sent to the Committee on Bills in the third reading, which is where all of these different stops were put in place back before we had the internet. And and before a lot of people could read back then,
Right.
honestly. So they would read it out loud in the chamber, and you could take notes, figure out what you wanted to amend, things like that.
So after the third reading, what does that mean now?
So after second reading, it gets sent to the Committee on Bills in the third reading.
Okay.
Which is where it's kind of a clearinghouse for all legislation that's going through the process in
Okay.
both chambers. Each chamber has their own. They're not joint committees. So there's a bills in the third reading for each.
And then
they
the
never meet
third
together.
reading goes to,
Third reading then takes the bill. They do all their final edits. They
Oh,
look
okay.
at it. They make sure they have attorneys where they kind of will look at it and make sure it makes
It's-
sense
right.
in the context of the rest of the Mass General laws. And then if the leadership and the chair of third reading decides that it should be passed, or if they want to hear it, then they will put it out to the floor for discussion and potential engrossment, which means an up or down vote.
Oh my
So we'll
God.
go out to the chamber. It will, usually that's when it gets a full legislative session day, where it's what you think it is, where they're all in the chamber debating and talking and yelling at each other. And then they do their votes on their amendments, and then they do an up or down vote on it, which is engrossment. So once it's engrossed, then it will go to the other chamber for them to go through their process with it.
good Lord.
Currently, so another aspect of this is, according to the Massachusetts Constitution, the state legislature has to meet every 72 hours. That's both the Senate and the House. They have their own schedule. The Senate usually does Wednesdays, the House usually does Thursdays, and then they kind of break it up during the week depending on what they want to do. But Wednesday is usually assigned to the Senate for their formal sessions if they want to hold them. Thursday is assigned to the House for their formal sessions when they want to hold them. That's usual business, the normal calendar. It varies depending on if it's the budget or the end of the session. So every 72 hours they have to meet. So they have what's called formal and informal session. Formal session is exactly what you think it is. It's the usual legislative meeting. They're all in the room debating, voting, all that stuff. Informal session is when they do administrative and non-controversial bills. So that's where you'll see if they're trying to rename a bridge after a World War II veteran, stuff like that. Sick leave banks, normal things, local bills. And they kind of just, if you watch those, they're all available on malegislature.gov. If you want to go see them, you go to hearings and you can find the videos of all of them.
Yep.
It goes back like 15 years. It's usually the speaker's not actually in the room. It's like somebody that gets assigned to run the session that day. But there's almost, I'll say always, but there's always a member of the opposition party in the room. There's always a Republican in the room. And if somebody objects to something on the floor in an informal session, that's it for the day. It's done. So they're supposed to do non-controversial things, so things that aren't supposed to have objections to them.
Ah, I gotcha.
So when we see bills like these three that to us are controversial, and to any
Else it might not be.
principled member of the opposition party, in this case the Republicans, when we see them move into third reading by a voice vote where there's nobody in the room and there's a Republican sitting on camera looking at his phone, and it just rubs us a little bit the wrong way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So this happened for HD 4420 when it moved a couple times in informal session, and we were watching a Republican in the room not say anything. It happened for these three bills with a Republican in the room not saying anything in informal session. And
It's hard because then they want us to back them up, right?
we're just kind of going to let it sit there, and
I'm
people
sure you've
can-
had conversations with this person.
Not yet. We're just kind of letting the information sit out there for now. Kind of going to see how the membership reacts depending on what we're going to do.
Right.
Because you have good working relationships with so many of them in
And
the
it's-
State House.
And it's eternally frustrating to see.
That's a good point.
One of the great things about being in the minority, one of the few great things about being in the minority party, and one of the few places where you can exercise some power is in informal session. You can object to things and stop stuff from moving.
Right.
And one of the great things about being in the minority party is you get to vote your principles and not usually have very much backlash. But at this point, the opposition is so small and the majority is so large. There are certain aspects to the legislative calendar, like the budget, that are used as a bit of a cudgel, in our opinion, to keep opposition, even from the opposition party, down.
But you know what makes me crazy? Us, we're state leaders. I'm Rhode Island, Carries Mass for the Women for Gun Rights. We teach our girls that come in, the women that come in that don't know any of this, this is not a political issue. This is a constitution. It doesn't matter if you're Republican. It doesn't matter. We're not talking about Republican or Democrat. We're not, because everyone deserves to be able to exercise their Second Amendment. But it's so blatantly obvious,
Well, we always say
which I don't understand.
Goal is nonpartisan, but traditionally there's a party that aligns more with our cause than
And our belief.
another.
Right, but it doesn't sit well with me, because we all should be focusing on the Constitution. It doesn't matter who you are,
Right.
what your political
That's what the
affiliation
oath of office
is.
says, anyways.
Right.
And we agree. I mean, that's our bread and butter at Goal are pro-gun Democrats. That's kind of where we have to live And those are, that's kind of the hill that we live and die on. Because we usually know that most of the Republicans are going to stand with us. It's just, that's the political reality of things. And, you know, there are certain members of the Democratic Party that we work really well with, that support us, that hold the same values that we hold, and that's kind of where we live. They're our bread and butter.
And what are the values, Mike?
I mean, just being pro-Second Amendment, pro-Constitution,
Right.
pro-civil rights.
It's what everybody
Yeah.
should be.
Exactly. So,
And that's why we fight so hard to try
Yeah.
to protect it.
but when we see the party that is in the minority and is supposed to be the opposition standing down in the face of,
What's right.
well, in the face of, I guess, losing your earmarks
right,
in the
right,
budget, that's a problem for everyone.
Yeah.
You know, we always say, we were saying during the 4420 discussion, you know, the way that they got that bill to the floor was unusual, but legal. However, it's not a process problem, it's a personnel problem. If you hand these hypermajorities in every layer and branch of government to one group of people, that one group of people is going to take every advantage they have to enact their agenda. And agenda seems like such a dirty word, but it's not.
Right, but that's what it is.
But that's what it
though.
is. So in order to slow these things down, you need to have a robust opposition that keeps the majority honest.
Right.
And I don't know why, but we don't have that in this state right now.
Oh, so
And it's unfortunate.
it's sad.
But
That's why it's important. I know we got 2 minutes, but that's why it's important to know who you're voting for, understand who you're voting for, get out and vote, and know that your vote matters. So
Yeah.
if you don't think your vote matters, it does. And if we work together, we can make a difference. So thank you, Mike, so much. I hope
course.
to have you on again so we can
Yeah.
talk more about
This was
this.
fun.
And it's a very important topic, passionate to me, passionate
too.
for us, obviously. So thank you for joining us.
of course,
Thank
thanks for having me.
you.
Yeah, this was
Stay
fun.
safe.
If you
You
have
too.
Stay
vigilant,
vigilant.
stay vigilant. If you have any questions, reach out to us for Sisters in Arms, at Sisters in Arms 2022 @gmail.com. Thanks again.